Have you ever played a game where parts of it felt like the absolute peak, the Mount Everest of its genre, while other parts were so bad that it made you want to hit Alt F4 and uninstall the game? Because for me, that is Wuthering Waves. A gacha game that has some of the best open world movement paired with an extremely satisfying combat system, while simultaneously having extremely bland storytelling and a slow, expensive character building system. Now, I am aware that the developers are listening to the community and working to resolve some of these issues, which is also why I think it's worthwhile to discuss what this game does well, where it fails, and how it can be improved. These are my personal takes and criticisms, so please do let me know what you think about them in the comments down below. Also, this is about how the game was at launch, during its 1.0, so if you're watching this in 2025, most of these problems might no longer be there. Just treat this video as a time capsule of how things used to be. Now let's start with the good stuff, because I gotta give credit where credit is due: movement. It is so nice to have an open world game where you can actually move faster than a snail's pace. When I look at a mountain, I want to climb it. I don't want to have to wait for it to stop raining, or beat up a giant sushi fish, or listen to my character moan while slowly climbing up this tiny hill for 15 seconds. And I sure as heck don't want traversal options locked behind paid DLC or 5-star characters that I need 3 of if I want to continuously move at a fast enough pace. Wuthering Waves made it simple. You hit the dash button, the character runs, and they don't lose stamina unless you're in battle. And if you do run out of stamina, it recovers pretty quickly, so you don't have to just stand there menacingly while waiting for it to recharge. You also have a grappling hook for a little extra boost, you can flip over ledges that you absolutely couldn't in other games, and you can parkour over smaller obstacles like fences or goats. The game also has a creature collection feature, which is used as the main way to acquire character stats, and the monster you equip in the main slot can be used for movement. It's not every monster, but some of them can provide excellent movement utility, like this biker guy. In fact, the very first monster the game has you equip as part of its tutorial does just that. It gives you better movement. It is very well designed and I love it. Now of course, the main use for these monsters is not for movement, it's for combat. Apart from the usual actual game combos of normal attack, skill, and special, you can temporarily transform into the monster equipped to your main slot to do a special attack or use their special ability. There's a bunch of different monsters and they all do a bunch of different things. Apart from the monsters, you can also parry certain enemy attacks, you can dodge basically any attack, and you can dodge counter, which is very satisfying to do. Characters also have an intro and outro skill, kind of like Atelier Ryza if you've ever played those games, which can be used to deal extra damage or provide buffs to your team. And when fighting bulkier enemies, these swap skills help deal damage to their stagger bar, so you can focus more on attacking instead of just dodging. But wait, there's more, Billy Mays. The game goes one step further by providing an additional passive style skill, revolving around each character's sound gauge, and can perform an additional special attack every once in a while. They get very creative with these. Some just trigger extra moves, others work like a rhythm game, and honestly, I can't wait to see how else they use this bar in the future. It's a great way to set characters apart from one another. And I really like how the UI makes it easy for you to figure out what you're supposed to do to use that special move. Unfortunately, this is where I have to put my praises on pause, because as you might have noticed, there is a lot of systems already in place for the combat, and to be honest, trying to read the descriptions for what some of these things do feels like I'm reading a Yu-Gi-Oh card. If these are the descriptions for the characters at launch, I'm a bit scared to see how many paragraphs I'll have to read through for more mechanically complex characters that may come out later. Not only that, but since it is a gacha game, each different mechanic has its own level for you to enhance. Genshin only has 3 things to level up, Star Rail has 4, this game has 5. This isn't that much big of a deal since a lot of these levels just increase how much your damage scales off of your stats. Usually maxing these out will double the damage each of them does, and for most characters it's only worth it to level some of them, not all. It's a pretty standard gacha game thing, I'm just not a fan of how many things there are to level up. My concern is that at the higher levels, you'd need to grind for weeks just to get the materials needed to level all these stats up. Regardless, the real problem doesn't come from how well the skills scale off your stats, it's how you actually go about getting good stats in the first place. The broken ecosystem. Most enemies you fight in Wuthering Waves are some sort of monster, and they have a 20% chance of dropping an echo, which you can absorb in your Pokegourd and equip to your character. The main one can be transformed into during a battle or exploration, while the rest just give you a stat boost. They also have different costs, and you can mix and match monsters as long as the total cost is less than or equal to 12. The cost 4 monsters are the big boss monsters you can fight for character ascension materials or weekly bosses. They can get stats like healing bonus, crit rate, and crit damage for their main stats, and these are by far the easiest monsters to farm since they respawn pretty quickly and you're guaranteed to get an echo for every 2 bosses you defeat. Also, you don't have to claim the reward after defeating them in order for them to respawn, which would require time-gated materials, so farming them can be a pretty smooth process and you can just literally farm the same monster all day long. Now the cost 3 monsters, those suck. You only get a limited number of them in your world until it resets the next day, and you're only guaranteed an echo for every 5 you defeat. Not only that, but they're the only monster that can have an elemental damage bonus, and there's 6 elements, so more often than not, you will be getting the wrong elemental damage bonus or random stats like HP percent. The reason this is frustrating is because there's also monster factions which work as sets, and you can get a bonus if you have 2 or 5 species of monster in that set. Also, for some reason, the game doesn't tell you what the 5-piece bonus is numerically. Tell me the numbers. The only suggestion I have for these is to give out echo selectors as event rewards every once in a while, kinda like Star Rail's self-modeling resin, or to make food items that boost the odds of getting a specific elemental bonus or stat when an echo is farmed. Kinda like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's sandwich system, and I hate to use that game as an example of all things, but like, it could work in this specific situation. A lot of players also complained about how slow it is to level up your echoes, and I 100% agree, especially since both the level up and substat unlock materials are only accessible through Tacet Fields, and you only have enough limited time energy to do 4 of these a day. I did one as a test, and it looks like you can get enough experience to level up a 5-star echo from 0 to 11, and enough materials to unlock just 1 substat. In my case, they wrote into pretty useful stats, but a lot of the time you'll be getting garbage. Thankfully, the developers are listening to feedback, and we are supposedly getting increased drop rates soon, although I am not sure by how much. That being said, the system is currently very broken since per week of doing just Tacet Fields and nothing else, you only get enough materials to unlock 28 substats for a 5-star echo. Meanwhile, the Pioneer podcast, this game's battle pass, has a weekly goal of tuning 50 echo substats. That is to say, if you want to be getting that battle pass experience and are a low spender or free to play, you have to waste resources on 4-star echoes, which is not worth it in the long run because at their max level, their main stats are lower than those of a 5-star echo at level 10. Unless you are very early game, there is no reason to ever invest in a 4-star echo, especially with how scarce and time-gated the leveling resources are. Since I'm really slow at editing videos, I got to Union level 40 while working on this one, and with the supposedly better drops at level 40, I could get enough materials to level 42 traces, so in theory, once you get to Union level 50 or higher, you should be able to actually do the battle pass stuff by only leveling up 5-star echoes, but the fact that you can't or have to waste resources in the early and mid game seems like bad game design to me personally. You're stuck doing this unoptimal thing for like a month. This becomes even more of a problem when you look at the Tower of Adversity, one of the endgame modes in Wuthering Waves, where you essentially need to build 3 different teams to tackle the content. Unless you're amazing at dodge counters and parries, you have to build at least 6 different characters. Since an average player probably plays this game casually and is likely to have skill issues, it is important to give them enough resources to experiment with and build teams early on, especially since there's not much else to do after clearing the story. You'll just be grinding for echoes and trying to take on the tower. Maybe exploring a bit since the movement is very nice, but once you've done that, it's just an extremely slow grind because of how limited the echo resources are. Now I know this is in part due to the fact that it's a gacha game and I'm just barely at Union level 40, and it looks like the game will go all the way up to 80, but I'm already at a point of the game where I have only a little bit of exploration left and want to build and use my characters now. The echo leveling problem is made even worse by the fact that you'll probably want to use some of these time-limited farming resources on other things like world bosses, materials to level up your skill tree, character or weapon experience, or the limited time weekly bosses. Part of me was happy to see the 240 limit on this resource until I realized that everything is just so expensive. It's all 40 or 60, and that's a problem because once a player hits mid-game, it's just going to be an insanely slow grind for very minimal progress. And it's made even worse by the fact that things like the material shops refresh only once per patch instead of once per month. I think the best fix for this problem is to have the wild monsters drop monster experience tubes or the resource needed to unlock subslots. It doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe you have like 1 cost monster drop 1 blue tube and the 3 cost monsters drop the purple tube, but only 10 to 20% of the time. That way, after spending an hour collecting echoes, I can pick the best ones and level them up a bit to see if they're worth the further investment, which I can then go grind for in the Tacet Fields, which are pretty expensive. The other option is to reduce the cost of the Tacet Fields to say 40 per field. They could do the same with the Exiles and Fraxidus enemies, which are more human-like, and make it so that one faction drops character level up material while the other drops weapon level up material, even if it is at a low rate, like say 5 to 10%. That way, players can still get rewards for exploring and fighting enemies long after they've 100%ed every area on the map. Maybe I'm asking for a bit too much here, but at the same time, I think it's boring how I won't be able to get characters up to a usable level for several weeks or even months, let alone consider tackling the endgame content. That being said, there is another endgame mode which is very well executed and only requires you to build one character really well, the Elusive Realm. This is Wuthering Waves' roguelike endgame mode. You can only pick one character to use and an echo to level up as you make your way through the realm, and some support characters which can only use their burst to help you out during battle. Each room you clear can give you a buff, and sometimes breaking these glowy rocks will uncover another cat, which will give you another buff. As is with roguelike modes, the first few floors are usually the most difficult, and by the time you reach the final floor, you're the monster that's absolutely nuking everything in sight. The best part about this is that you can use trial characters to clear the majority of this mode, which is an excellent way to try out different playstyles or limited time characters, or just picking who to build next. I personally didn't really care to pull for Gian until I used him in this mode and realized just how much I enjoy his playstyle. There's definitely some quality of life things in the game that could make this mode even better, like letting you easily check which upgrades you need to level up your echo while selecting said upgrades, or providing an image for the item you're about to pick, as well as its effect. But overall, this mode is pretty fun and I'm looking forward to playing more of it. If anything, the one suggestion I would make is to have this refresh every time the limited banner changes, that way I can try out the new limited character in this mode and see if I like them enough to pull. Overall, I'm pretty happy with what this mode has to offer. Speaking of things to offer, it's time to talk about the story, which offers very little. Wuthering Waves is set in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi world, and you start out as a character that has amnesia, but is somehow supposed to be super special and are joined by your standard cast of gacha characters, then make your way to the city. You're instantly hit with a bunch of jargon vomit that is hard to follow, but basically, in this world there's resonators which have a tacet mark and they can use special abilities. They're typically strong enough to fight the Tacet Discords, which are these monsters you see everywhere. Why or how these powers and monsters appeared? I don't know. Why are there good monsters like the dragon protecting the first town? I have no idea. Why does every character say we're super special and instantly trust us? I know it's gacha MC logic and there's some sort of prophecy that's foretold to the leaders of this one city that we're special, but that doesn't explain why all the characters trust us all the time. We just smile and nod. Everyone loves us. I mean, this is so like it breaks immersion completely. The first half of the story was basically sending you off on a scavenger hunt with 4 random items that should help you better understand what's going on, because the one person who can is off in a meeting right now. There's a rogue organization called the Fraxidus that wants to speed up the end of the world by reviving Trinodians, which are just giant monsters. I think that was never explained all that well. A general is fighting these monsters on the front line, and there's a bunch of exiles who will backstab you even after you generously give them some money, and they get a very nicely animated cutscene. This game does nail the animated cutscenes. The last thing was a mangosteen, and I have no idea what the mangosteen was supposed to say. The game does pick up the pacing and intrigue for the second half of its story, however, a lot of the key moments don't quite feel that amazing since they lack the proper build-up. They looked cool, but felt bland. Like this one scene where you have an Avenger-style moment of all the playable characters coming together to fight off some monsters, but we literally just met the pink-haired girl for the first time a few moments ago, and who the heck is this hat guy? Then there's moments where characters are staying behind to take care of the monsters so that you can keep going because because time is of the essence. But like, the last and only time we saw this character, they didn't even have permission to leave the city and go to the back lines. How the heck are they suddenly good enough to be on the front lines and solo a bunch of monsters for us? This is supposed to be a cool moment, but there's no setup to make it feel cool. I'm just left asking questions. And the worst part is, they repeat this exact same trope like 10 minutes later. That's not to say that there's no build-up at all in the game's story, but that there's lack of build-up for the key animated moments. One good example of build-up was us being told about the Retro Act Rain. Then we go to a factory with Alto and Encore and find out that there were people there who tried to recreate it. And after that quest gets done, bam, the real Retro Act Rain. We get foreshadowing, we get setup that tells us more about this thing and what it means, and then it hits us. We get the cool delivery, and it makes sense. They can tell the story well, but somehow they fail to do it like half the time. Also, the voice direction in the English dub was absolutely horrible at times.
You will not escape.
Like, there's this one segment where you're supposed to be defeating a bunch of monsters while protecting a cannon and a guy just died, and your companion just talks in like the most chill, relaxed voice ever.
Disruptor's 50% charge. Enemies ahead. Watch out, Rover.
We're literally in the middle of an intense fight. Why do you sound like you're sipping tea on a warm summer afternoon? And you can hear that the character has so much more expressiveness in their battle lines, and actually the recording quality is completely different. So it's not like the voice actress isn't capable of hitting the right tones. Something told me that they had to redo a bunch of lines and they were short on time and they probably had to record one at home while the other was at a studio. I have no idea. But as someone who works with voice actors from time to time, I'm pretty sure that the problem was either lack of direction or time or both. I personally had to send back many lines many a time because I was the one who didn't include enough information on the context or the expected emotion for certain deliveries. I did hear that the story in this game was completely changed from the closed beta, so maybe they ended up rushing the recording just a bit too much, and this definitely needs to be fixed because it is extremely immersion breaking from a story that already barely makes any sense, and most people usually want to listen to the game in their main language. I'm sure the other dubs are pretty alright. Sadly, the immersion breaking problems continue as lines will sometimes just get cut off mid-voice, even if you don't have autoplay on. And sometimes the text doesn't match what is being said. Again, been there, done that. It happens when you try to rush this stuff out. The rush nature also impacted the characters. The beginning roster of Wuthering Waves consists of 9 4 stars, 5 standard banner 5 stars, plus Jian and Yinlin, the limited banner characters. This game is extremely generous with giving these characters out to us. We get 3 of the 4 stars near the start of the game, 1 from login bonuses, 1 from the end game mode. You can basically get every single one of the launch 4 stars from either the freebies or the 2 limited banners. Then there's a random 5 star followed by a 5 star of your choice, and a free 5 star as an apology for the game's rough launch, which to be fair, it was pretty rough. I was having major lag just from picking up items, which is something you do a lot in these open world games. And I tried playing this on mobile. It is absolutely horrible on mobile. I don't know how people play this game on their phone. This is a computer game, not a phone game, unless they fix it up. Then again, the game was still running better than Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So I just lowered my graphic settings and coped until they patched it up so that it works pretty okay on the computer now. My main problem with most of the characters in the game is that they feel very flat, and that is in part due to how the game handles its storytelling. Why should I care about Yen Yang or Chisha or Baizhi or Mortefi? They kind of just show up, do whatever they need to do to solve your current problem, and then we move on. Very little time is spent on showing the nuances of these characters and what makes them unique or likable. It makes them feel more like chess pieces than party members. The random chairs all over the world have more characterization than some of the actual characters in the game. Also, I would totally love to see a video essay on the chairs in Wuthering Waves. Someone do this. Now, I'm not saying that the game should make us go on a very awkward date with every single character, but as someone who's a sucker for a good story, I'd like to have some sort of emotional investments, either in the character or the world. What's at stake here? What are these characters struggling with? What are their hopes and dreams? Without any of these, the only driving force we have for an overall plot is Fraxit is bad because they want to end the world, and that's a bad thing in general. At the same time, the game does very little to make you care about said world or its characters. So even at its core, the story not only breaks immersion, it fails to immerse you in the first place. Interestingly enough, this didn't seem to be a problem before they changed the story. I managed to find a clip of the second closed beta on YouTube where we fight the first boss in the game, and they had so many moments that showed off Yang Yang and Chisha's personality and character, but then it got completely scrapped in the actual game. It kind of feels like the players in the beta test got served food from a Michelin star chef, and then they went, ew, I don't like the taste of this spice, or any spice, or salt even, just give me the blandest dish possible. And that's what we got for the main game. Or the more likely outcome, which is that they said that they don't like a specific spice, and then while rushing to rewrite the story, the developers just forgot to write any spice at all. The good news is that the character-specific quests at least try to give you more insight on the available cast, but there's only 3 of them in 1.0, and even they struggle to do much. They aren't bad, but they aren't good either. Let's look at the latest character quest related to Yinlin as an example. The story centers around you going to investigate some secret organization that seems to be bringing dead people back to life in the form of puppets, but those puppets will make people overclock, which can range from causing them headaches to outright making someone unalive. The premise is that Yinlin is a secret patroller who's working undercover and trying to find the location of this puppet factory, but then she blows you up, drugs you with poison, uses you as a meat shield against the real patrollers. Somehow you end up in the actual puppet factory where the side effects of the puppets are making goons go crazy, and when you reach the room where the big boss man is, the doll master, it turns out he knows Yinlin. They've known each other for a long time and have been working together to revive Yinlin's dead parents as dolls. But then Yinlin suddenly just changes her mind and says, nah, it's time to let go of the past. Meanwhile, the doll master goes cartoon mode. Ha ha ha! I have hacked the patrollers and deleted your information. Now you'll never be a patroller anymore. Ha ha ha! The only cool part in this whole story is Yinlin doing this whole, I don't need to be a patroller to do the right thing. And then we kick his butt and get him arrested. You make your report to Chisha, then meet up with Yinlin once again for some spicy looking moments. Or reviewing what just happened. Turns out the doll master is only a cog, the Fraxters are the real bad guys, and chances are they're probably gonna use these dolls to try to revive a dead character. Probably this guy. Anyways, bye! By the way, I might have another identity next time we meet. At no point in the story did we see anything about her taking different identities or forms, which is weird because that's exactly what they showed off during the trailer, and I was looking forward to that, and it just never happened. Kinda made me feel like the Yinlin in the trailer was a whole different character than the Yinlin in the game. Now, if you didn't notice what was wrong with the story, let me point some things out for you. If she's known and worked with this doll maker for a long time, then how did she not know where the factory was? And to add to that, how does she know he's listening to us when we're down there? And if she's been working with him for such a long time, why the sudden change of heart? What got her to make the right choice after letting him go this far for a very, very long time? Also, every time there's danger, we're just completely immune to it. We got plot armor. Yinlin attacks us out of nowhere. Now we dodge that. Yinlin electrifying us. Now we'll live. Got poisoned without an antidote. Now it's fine. Just walk around and talk to everyone. Read some documents and then get yoinked to a factory. The factory is also packed with the dolls that make everyone overclock. I guess we don't overclock. Yinlin doesn't overclock. We also get to fight a giant robot while still poisoned? No problem. What am I? An isekai protagonist? Anyways, I'm pretty sure this whole story was supposed to be some sort of allegory about how it's important to mourn and move on from the loss of a loved one. Otherwise, it will start to wear you down. But the way the story was executed just failed to hit those beats, especially since Yinlin's parents were the focal point of the main villain's plan. She never had a letting go moment. She didn't even talk about her parents up until the doll maker shows up. And that's what the game keeps doing narratively. It does not set things up to create emotional buildup. It fails to maintain tension, and then it just goes, look, climax of the story. No! When I'm running around the open world, I would love getting to zoom through the place and grapple up a cliff, but don't do this in a narrative setting. The whole point of the narrative mountain is the climb. Don't skip it. Now, they don't do this for every story beat, but it's like this the majority of the time. So you get a lot of cool looking cutscenes, but not a lot of meaning or development behind them, which makes them feel bland. That being said, there are some characters which I thought had a good introduction and enough information about them to make me sort of interested in them and the world. Alto and Encore, for example, were a very sweet duo. Alto has those morally dubious silly guy vibes, and Encore is a devious precious little girl. Seeing the two of them interact helped bring out both of their characters, especially with that one line where Encore calls him Uncle Alto and he gets offended because he's not that old. We don't see this level of humor with most of the other characters, especially not when they're introduced, and I kinda wish we did. Scar is another great example. He's one of the first antagonists we meet, although he makes it sound like we'll be allies at some point in the future. It's easy to tell that he's very passionate and chaotic, and his voice execution was absolutely on point every single time. Camellia, even though she only shows up for a brief moment, this girl is a walking red flag. She gives major Ubo vibes for those of you who've watched Frieren. She's supposed to be a member of the group trying to save the world and stop the Fraxidus, but she doesn't care if the world ends. As a short introduction, this is enough to create some intrigue. It makes her seem very chaotic, confident, and not at all scared in the face of danger. You already know people are gonna be wailing on her banner, and this is all from a tiny bit of nuance that they managed to write for a short interaction. Some of these characters are getting maybe 5 to 10 minutes of screen time, but they have more revealed about them than the main cast we see throughout the story. And I think that's a major storytelling problem. Because at least in 1.0, the game seems more focused on selling us upcoming characters than getting us involved and interested in its world and existing ones. I know they have a skip button so you can just ignore like 90% of the text in the game, but that doesn't mean that this text does not matter. It is a wonderful feature for players who are here for the action, but that does not mean we shouldn't care about the text at all. I like having a skip button, but what I like having even more is a reason to never want to use it. I believe that having an interesting and engaging world along with really good combat systems is key for the longevity of a live service game. With long waits and grinds between updates, I need something to look forward to. Otherwise, why should I bother getting the battle pass, the daily login bonus, or paying for polls? Then again, maybe I'm just not their target audience, and maybe they don't care about having a good story or character development. As long as they're hot or can make big number go bigger, that's good enough. And to their credit, a lot of the characters are very good looking. I mean, look at the MC. This is like the best looking MC I've seen, and a lot of these other characters, very, very pretty. I am aware that part of the blandness in characterization is due to the rushed changes made between the second closed beta and release. That being said, 1.1 will also be released a week early, so if you have any hopes for better writing or voice direction, I would keep them low until 1.2 or later. I do hope they address these problems sooner, because really good story definitely makes me more interested in pulling and building more characters, and sticking with the game for years to find out what happens next. And of course, if you're gonna stick with a gacha game for a long while, it better have a good gacha system. Out of the 4 gacha games I've personally played in the past year, Wuthering Waves definitely has the least predatory gacha system. The drop rate for the limited time 5-star character is 0.8%, which means on average you need 30 less pulls than other gacha games like the Hoyo ones. You also have a limited time weapon banner that guarantees you'll get the limited time weapon in 80 pulls, which again, compared to the Genshin banner where you have to pull up to 240 times to get the weapon you want, this is a huge improvement. The only downside is that the pulls for limited time weapons are done with a different token than those for limited time characters, so you just have to be picky about which tokens you buy, or don't convert your little, I don't even know what these are called, don't convert those crystals until you know what you want specifically. That is not the case for the standard weapon banner, which uses the same tokens as the standard character banner. Also, the game does give players like a free 5-star weapon for reaching Union level 45, which is yet another very generous freebie. I'm loving these. Either way, the more consumer-friendly weapon banner makes it more likely that I'd even consider spending on it, since at least I know I wouldn't have to go into thousands of dollars of debt just to pull a signature weapon. I know they matter, but like, it doesn't improve the gameplay that much. In conclusion, I think Wuthering Waves is a pretty fun game to play, especially with all the movement options and more skill-based combat system. Collecting echoes can be grindy at times, all the time, but it is also pretty fun, and yes, you can find shiny variants too. As a Pokemon player, that was nice. If you're looking for an open world action game that feels great to play, this is the game for you, as long as you're playing it on PC. Otherwise, we gotta wait for them to fix these performance issues, because right now they're kinda bad. But if you're looking for a gacha game with a great story, well, there's much better alternatives. Because at the moment, Wuthering Waves is flashy, but extremely bland in the narrative department, and with a cast full of flat personality on very pretty characters, which can be fixed in future updates. After all, this is just the 1.0 story, and a lot of live service games seem to struggle with starting out strong, but then pick up the pace later, so there is hope. One thing I really like about this game is that the developers definitely seem to care about player satisfaction and are taking player feedback about things like the echo leveling system, which, as someone who plays Pokemon, it's almost unheard of. The developers taking feedback and working to improve the game? What is that? It took them 6 months to remove the placeholder Pokeballs used in certain locations, and I'm still running into new glitches to this day that will never get patched in Scarlet and Violet. So when a multi-million-dollar developer listens to players and tries its best to improve the player experience and gives a lot of freebies as an apology for the poor performance of the game they released, I see that as a great thing. And despite being a gacha game which usually relies on baiting simps into spending all their money on hot limited time characters, they have a very friendly weapon banner and aren't afraid to give out 5 stars. I like these consumer friendly practices and hope the game succeeds, since that will show other developers in the field that treating your player base well actually pays off, and then they'll follow suit. That being said, I'm not sure how much I'll stick around to play this game, especially not every day, since world building and a good story matter to me personally, and they majorly fail in this department. But I'll still give it a try for the next couple of updates, since I really do enjoy the combat and I'm looking forward to some of the upcoming characters. If the echo and storytelling problems get fixed, great, but if not, Wuthering Waves will remain the worst narrative, best game I've played in 2024. That's what I think anyways. What about you? Are you playing Wuthering Waves, and what do you think about the game? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!